Robert Carlyle Byrd's life can almost be read like two parallel books. One, the public record of a senator who rose from nothing to become the longest-serving member of Congress in American history, and the other, a hidden ledger of threats, shadows, and danger that followed him year after year, decade after decade. He was born into hardship in 1917, in a world where poverty was a given and survival was earned through grit. Raised in West Virginia by adoptive relatives, he grew up in coal towns where men labored until their hands turned black and their lungs filled with dust. Yet even as a boy, Byrd's weapon was not his strength but his determination. He learned the violin, taught himself to debate, and memorized scripture until he could command a room. Those habits carried him into politics, and eventually in 1958, into the U.S. Senate. But the moment he stepped into that chamber, the shadows began to gather. By 1955, before he had even settled into his Senate career, the FBI had already opened files connected to him. At first, they were slim folders, scattered correspondences, notes about suspicious calls, or angry letters. But the files did not end. They grew. They stretched from Eisenhower to Bush, covering nearly half a century. Imagine the scene in the early 1960s. The nation is still raw from Cold War tensions, and Byrd's office receives a letter. At first glance, it looks like any other constituent's message. But the handwriting is jagged, almost violent in its slant. The words inside are chilling. You will not live to finish your term. We will see to that. The staff freezes. The letter is quickly tucked into an envelope, sealed, and delivered to the FBI. Within hours, an agent in a gray suit sits across from Byrd's secretary, taking notes, asking questions. Outside the Capitol, the world goes on. Tourists snap photos, senators shake hands. But behind closed doors, the machinery of protection wears into motion. In the 1970s, as Vietnam protests rattled the country and trust in government fractured, Byrd's name appeared again and again in FBI reports. Anonymous callers spat curses into the phone. Some said he was a traitor. Others swore vengeance for a vote he had cast. A few hinted at detailed knowledge, his travel dates, his appearances, his routines. Each time, the FBI scrambled to track the source. Sometimes they found nothing. Sometimes they found men on the margins of society, angry enough to write but too broken to act. But the possibility of danger never disappeared. Robert Byrd, however, did not let it show. To the world, he was relentless. He spoke for hours on the Senate floor, weaving history into his arguments, quoting the Roman Senate as easily as the U.S. Constitution. He carried himself like a man untouchable, but privately he knew the risks. The murders of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert F. Kennedy were reminders that a single bullet could erase a lifetime of work. Byrd knew that, at any moment, the threats in the letters could become reality. In the 1980s, when America turned its eyes abroad to the Cold War, the threats did not stop. They only changed in tone. Some came from extremists railing against his policies. Others came from lone individuals, unmoored from reality but dangerous nonetheless. FBI agents grew accustomed to opening new files under his name. Some cases ended with arrests. Others faded into unsolved mysteries. The paper trail thickened. A silent monument to the peril of power. There were moments when the danger felt close enough to touch. A suspicious package left near his office. A note slipped into a constituent letter that seemed harmless until it wasn't. A phone call that mentioned his grandchildren by name. Each time, Byrd's staff felt the chill. Each time, the FBI reinforced security. But Byrd himself pressed forward, as though daring the darkness to strike. By the 1990s, his hair was white, his face lined with decades of battles fought in both politics and survival. He was an elder statesman by then, but the shadows had not let him go. The files grew even in those years, documenting threats as technology evolved. Emails laced with venom, phone calls from untraceable numbers, anonymous faxes filled with hate. He lived under constant watch, even if the public never knew. And yet, in those late nights when the Capitol dome glowed against the sky, Byrd would still be found in his office. The halls quiet, the echoes long, he would sit surrounded by law books, the weight of history pressing down. Perhaps he heard the whispers of those who wanted him gone. Perhaps he thought of the files piling up in some FBI cabinet. But he never stopped. He would rise the next day, walk into the chamber, and let his voice fill the room again. By the time the FBI files ended in 2003, they painted a chilling portrait: nearly 50 years of threats, intimidation, and criminal acts aimed at silencing one man. They did not silence him. If anything, they proved his endurance. Robert Carlyle Byrd outlasted every threat, every whisper, every shadow that tried to haunt him. He left behind not only the legacy of the longest Senate career in U.S. history, but also the quiet, hidden legacy of survival, the courage to face fear without bowing to it. In the end, Byrd's story is not only about power. It is about the unseen cost of leadership, the way courage must be renewed each day in the face of danger. His enemies left behind pages in FBI files. He left behind history itself.